Welcome to Digital Literacy, a guide to using technology and journalism. Welcome to your first lesson on digital literacy. These videos that you'll be watching over the next 12 or 13 weeks here were created to help you understand some of the basic technology that's being used by journalists around the world right now. Now, these videos are not going to deal heavily with content that will come from all of your Grady classes in and of themselves, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of these core elements. So the first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about the lab that you're going to be working in this semester, and then we're going to talk about the Macintosh itself, since many of you work on a PC environment, and then we're going to talk about something called digital asset management. But before we get to all that, we need to talk about some rules for this lab. There is no food and no drink allowed in this lab. This lab was completely rebuilt in the fall of 2010, and we want to keep it in top operating condition. Also, you should know that there are more than a half a dozen classes that are being taught in this classroom every semester. So you want to make sure that you leave absolutely nothing behind, because the chances of you getting it back are, to be honest, a little bit slim, and there's certainly not going to be an opportunity to get it back very quickly. If you do leave anything behind and we find it, we will most likely put it in the dean's office in the lost and found there. Now we're going to jump ahead a little bit real quick here to talk about the files that you might be accessing on the computers. Any file that you are going to need again, you have to take with you, because these computers are going to be wiped on a regular basis. So any files that you leave on the desktop or hidden someplace else inside the operating system, those are going to be eliminated, and you will not have an opportunity to get them back. So that wraps up our little talk there about the lab. Please remember that this is a lab you're going to spend a lot of time in. Just be courteous and take care of it. But let's talk about the Macintosh. Again, some of you have not worked in a Macintosh environment before, so we're going to give you a quick primer on some of the stuff that you need to know about it. Now, I'm not working on one of the lab computers right now. This video is being recorded on a laptop, so it's going to look a little bit different. The background's going to be a little different. There's a whole bunch of icons sitting across the top of my menu, the top of the screen, that you're not going to see. But the basic operating principle is the same. All right, we're going to talk about the buttons that you need to find first on the Macintosh. So the first thing I want you to do is reach around, once you're in the lab, to the left-hand side of the iMac, and on the lower left-hand corner on the back side, you're going to find a small button. That's the power button. You may want to lean around just to take a quick look at it the first time you go to fire it up, because it's pretty smooth back there. Apple has a habit of not liking buttons, and they have managed to hide this one amazingly well. That will power up the computer. After you've gone ahead and powered up the computer, you're going to get a login screen, and it's going to give you two options. One of those is going to be student. If you click on student, that will bring you into the Macintosh operating system. The other one needs a password, and that's for administrator access, so just ignore that one completely. While that's firing up, take a look on the opposite side, on the back of the right-hand corner of it, and you're going to see a whole bunch of ports. Now, there's a couple of different ports that are in here. The first one that you're going to take a look for is something called the USB port, and there's, I believe, 3 of them on the back of this. This is the Universal Serial Bus. This is the most common way of connecting peripherals to computers right now. USB has a throughput, or a data transfer rate, of 480 megabits per second. You will use this to plug in your USB drives. If you're at home, you're going to plug in printers, your cameras, and things along those lines that way. One of the other ones that's on there is something called the FireWire port. Now, FireWire is a much faster connection method, and if you are moving a lot of video files around, you're going to want to use a FireWire drive, because that is going to be significantly quicker to operate. The other thing to look for back there is the headphone jack. When you're dealing with audio and video files here in the lab, you're going to want to bring in a set of your own headphones, and anything that works in a standard MP3 player will work just fine in here. Let's talk real quickly about USB FireWire connections again. You're going to get a USB thumb drive. You've probably gotten several of them in your time here in Grady, and from other classes around campus as well. Thumb drives are great. They're fairly small, usually between 1 and 4 gigabytes worth of storage, and for Word documents and basic stuff like that, they work really, really well. Once you get up to larger storage sizes, you're going to want to move to a hard drive, and a hard drive is usually going to have a spinning platter in it that stores data. Smallest hard drives you're going to see now are probably in the 120 gigabyte range, and they can go all the way up to about 2 terabytes worth of data. 1,000 gigabytes equals 1 terabyte, so you can get quite a bit of stuff on those. All right, so let's take a look here at the Finder again. The Finder is what Apple calls the desktop. And you can always tell what program you have active by looking in the upper left-hand corner. And you're going to see right now it says Finder. And just to the left of that is an Apple icon. If we click on that, you're going to see there's a couple of other things in here. Now, the one that we're most interested in is the one that's second from the bottom, and that's shutdown. When you're done working, you're going to want to shut down these computers, and that's where you're going to find that. All right. Now I've got a couple of folders sitting over here. Actually, these are aliases to folders, but we're not going to worry about aliases. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click on one of these and open it up. And you can see that I've got a listing of all the files that are sitting in here. Now there's a couple of things that we can do here that are really kind of handy. One of them is we can get info about these. And the way we do it is we click on any one of them, and then we're going to hit the Command key. The Command key is just to the left and the right of the spacebar. If we hit Command I, this brings up a little Get Info window, and there's some interesting information in here that we may find useful. The first thing that we're going to see under General is the kind of file it is. This is telling us that this is a JPEG file, and the second one is the size. If you are moving, if you're moving a lot of files around, you're going to want to check and see what the size of those files are, so that you know you've got enough space. So you can check that. The other thing that you can see in the window view, all the way down the bottom, is how much space is available. So if you look down here, right now this is telling me that I have just over 122 gigabytes worth of available space on this hard drive at this point in time. Now this is what's called the list view. We can change the view that we have here up at the top of the window. We've got a couple of icons here. The leftmost one is going to give us this icon view, and I'm not sure why anybody would want this because it's really hard to see. But on the Mac, you can actually come down into the lower right-hand corner and you can zoom in on these icons. I almost never use that. What I usually use is this list view, the second icon here, the horizontal lines, because this is really easy to take a look at. It gives me a lot of information. It gives me the name of my files here. It gives me the date modified, the size of them, and the kind. And I can actually sort by all these different things just by highlighting or clicking on those titles up at the top. When I turn it blue, that's the one that's been chosen. You also see there's a little arrow on the right-hand side of each of these little bars here. If I click on the bar a second time after it's been modified, it'll flip the direction of these. So right now I'm going from newest to oldest on the date modified, and if I flip that around and then scroll all the way back up to the top here, you'll see that it is going in the opposite direction. Actually, I had that backwards. Anyways, you can figure that one out fairly quickly. The third one over here is what's called a column view, and this allows you to see into some folders if you want to. This is pretty handy to work with. And then the last one is called cover flow, and it's really cool, but I'm not sure why anybody would want to use it. So I tend to stay away from that. Right? But again, usually what I work in is the list view. That's the simplest one for me to work in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this window, and the way we do that on a Mac is in the upper left hand corner we've got these three colored buttons. The red button, when you mouse over it a little bit, you'll see an X. That's going to close the window. The green button, if we click on that, that changes the size of the window. So if I wanted to make this really big, I can move that to the corner, come down to the lower right hand corner, and I can click and drag this out, and then toggling the green button will change the size back and forth between those. The yellow button, I tend not to use that a whole lot, but what that does is minimizes it and it sends it down into something called the dock. So I'm going to close this, and we're going to move down to the bottom here to what's called the dock, and this is where Apple stores all of the software programs that it has available to you. Now what we've done is we've set up the iMacs in the lab so that every one of the docks is exactly the same, and the docks are what's called locked, so you can't accidentally drag something out of there, and the order of all the programs is exactly the same. So what we can do is we can cycle around down here and we'll find Microsoft Word, which is this blue W, and give that a moment to launch. And I'm also going to launch something else. I'm going to launch, let's say, I'm going to go ahead and launch a program called Audacity that we'll use later on in the semester. And I'll tell you why we're going to do that in a moment. Because there's a couple of really key commands that you're going to want to get used to, particularly if you're working with multiple programs at the same time. Audacity, just in case you're curious, is an audio editing software package that we'll be using a little bit later on. One of the first things that you want to know is the difference between the Command key and the Control key. If you come from a Windows environment, you're used to hitting the Control key and then some other key on the keyboard to make it do things. On the Apple, we use that Command key, and again, the Command key is both to the left and the right of the keyboard. Now, when you've got multiple programs open and you want to move quickly between them, the easiest way to do this is to hit that Command key and Tab. So if I hit Command and Tab, you can see that this is now giving me a listing of all of the programs that I have active right now. So there's Audacity, Word, the Finder, and a program called ScreenFlow, which is what I actually use to produce these videos. And what I can do is I can just keep hitting tab, or I can just mouse over the program that I want, and it'll move me to that program. So it's very easy to move between multiple programs here. All right, now Word is a pretty standard Word, so you can go in here and you can type a whole bunch of things. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste something in there so that it's a little bit quicker for us to move along through here. Now, after I've worked on this and done all of my editing and writing and all of that stuff, I need to save the files. Up across the top, you have your standard menus. So under File, you'll have Save and Save As. Save will just, because we haven't saved this before, is going to bring up this little save window here, and we can give it a name. So we will talk about this a little bit more later on, but we have a naming convention that we are going to use. And I'm just going to call this Demo, and I'm going to save it to the desktop. All right, so there's a couple of things along the left-hand side here. These are all the places that you have options for. I'm just going to click on Desktop, and then I'm going to go ahead and click Save. All right, so that's all of that. Now here, that yellow dot up in the upper left-hand corner that we talked about, this could be kind of handy if you've got multiple documents going. If I click that, it's going to take that, and it's going to hide it. And what I need to do is if I come back down to Microsoft Word and click on that, it'll open that up again. So it allows me to take a look at that. Now, copying and pasting, it's very similar on the Mac as it is to a PC. If I come in here and I select this, I can hit Command-C for copy, hit return a few times, come down, and hit Command-V for paste. These are also available under the Edit area here as well. All right, a couple of other quick things. If you ever need to do a screenshot to capture what's going on your screen, you can hit Command-Shift-3, and you get a little camera sound there. And what that has done, I'm going to come over here and quit out of Audacity since we don't need that anymore. On my desktop now, I have a screenshot that's got a date and a time listed for it. The other thing that I can do is I can do a targeted screenshot, and for this I'm going to hit Command-Shift-4, and now I get a little cursor there, a little target, and I can come down and I can select this. Now remember, this is creating an image file. It's not creating a text file out of this, but it does allow you to do a quick capture of something if you need to demonstrate what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and quit out of Word. Just hit Apple Q, and I made some changes in there. It's going to ask me if I want to save these, and I'm going to click Don't Save. Now, I've got these screenshots sitting over here on my desktop as well as that Word document. One of the neat things about the Mac is if I click on this Word document just once and then press the space bar, I get what's called a quick view, and this will let me see what's in that file. Now, the other thing that I can do is if I've got multiple things sitting on my desktop, I can just hit the down arrow, and now I can see those graphics, those images that I shot as well. And I can just hit Escape or click in the upper left-hand corner to get that to go away. All right, one other thing that you may want to do at some point in time is to create some folders. And the way you do that on the Mac is just click on the desktop and hit Command-Shift-N, and that gives you a folder, and then I can just rename this. So I'm going to call this a temporary, if I can spell, a temporary folder. And then to copy things into it, I can just drag over these three, drag them down in there. Now remember Get Info that we looked at earlier on? If I click on this once and hit Command-I for Get Info, it's now going to tell me the size of the files that are there on the folder. All right? So let's talk a little bit about digital asset management. Now this is a strange term that you've probably not heard before, but it's kind of important. Digital asset management is the sort of the philosophy behind keeping your files organized, and keeping them organized is unbelievably important. You're going to generate a lot of stuff. So the first part of digital asset management that I want to talk about are naming conventions. So the naming convention that we're going to use for this class, and for most of the ones that that would be taught in this lab, is a year, month, day start. What we're going to do is we're going to start every file with a 6-digit code. 2 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day. So for today, our code would be, again, I'm recording this before you're hearing it, it would be 10 for the year 2010, 08 for August, and 17 for the 17th day of the year. We're then going to put an underscore, which is shift hyphen, your initials, another underscore, and then the assignment name. And what that will do is that way when you're looking in the list view, that's going to keep all of your files in a specific order. All right, now let's talk about copying files and keeping stuff backed up. You have a couple of options for ways to keep things backed up. We're going to supply you with a USB thumb drive. That'll handle almost all of your text and audio files. When we get to photo and video a little later on, you may need something a little bit bigger. All right, but a USB drive is going to be the easiest way of handling things. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in my USB drive here. And in a second, it's going to pop up on the desktop. Remember, the USB port on the iMacs is on the backhand side on the right. So it showed up down here as Kingston. And the problem with calling it Kingston, which is the default, is that if I ever lose this, nobody's going to know whose it is. So what I'm going to do is click once on that just to highlight it, and then click a second time, and it's going to let me change the name here. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to my last name so that in case it gets found somewhere, it's easy enough for people to get it back to me. Now to get a file on there, all I need to do, or a folder, is grab it and drag it down on there. And it's going to give you a little sound telling you that it is done. Okay, so USB drives, great for small files. FireWire drives or USB hard drives would be better for larger files. And the other option that you have are burning to CDs or DVDs. On the right-hand side of the iMac, if you look, you'll see a slot for CDs or DVDs. CDs will handle about 650 megabytes worth of information. A DVD will handle about 4.5 gigabytes worth of information. So if you've got a folder full of stuff and you're not sure if you need a CD or a DVD, once again, just hit the Get Info on the folder, and that will help you out in determining what it is that you need to back that up to. A couple more tips here on the machines. Remember, don't leave anything on these machines. They are wiped on a regular basis. We do not have space nor the organizational ability to keep track of your files. So if it's something that you're ever going to need again, put it on a thumb drive, put it on a hard drive, take it with you when you leave the lab. Anything left on the desktop is deleted on a daily basis. Anything that you try and hide someplace else on the machine will be found and deleted on a weekly basis. Now, after you've completed your assignment, which you're going to get here in a couple of minutes, you're going to need to turn that in. And the way we do that on these machines is we submit to a server. Now, this file server is only accessible by the machines in the lab, so you can't turn these files in from outside the lab. If your instructor has an assignment outside of the class that they want you to send in, they may have you email it in or upload it to a different kind of server. But from the Finder, what you're going to do is go up to the top where it says Go and come all the way down to the bottom to where it says Connect to Server. And what this is going to do is it's going to bring up a little window here, and you're going to click Browse, and you're going to look for something called the Photo Server. And when you click on that, you'll then click on the Guest tab and Connect. And once you've done that, you're going to see a list of the different classes that's available. Double click on your class and it will appear as an icon on your desktop. You can then drag your files onto that folder, and you may get a little message that pops up that says you do not have the ability to view the results of this or see the results of this action. That's perfectly acceptable. That will copy it onto the server where your instructor will be able to go see it. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can ask your instructor to check and make sure that your file did make it over there. If it didn't make it over there, then you may have a bit of a problem. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the vocabulary. There's a couple of phrases that we talked about, and what we're going to do at the end of every one of these lessons, the last two parts of the lesson are going to be a list of vocab, and these vocab words may show up on quizzes that or exams that you have in class, and then will be your assignment that you'll be fulfilling while you're in class. All right, so your first vocab term is going to be USB. That's the Universal Serial Bus. That's low-speed hard drives, thumb drives, peripherals, printers, scanners, things like that you would use to connect to it. FireWire is a higher speed connection device. You will use that sometimes for video cameras and certainly for higher-end hard drives. The next thing is the dock, which is where the programs are located down along the bottom. Next thing you're going to want to know is the command key. That's the key that's just to the left and the right of the spacebar on your keyboard. That's the one that you're going to use to activate most quick keys. Get info, which by the way you can use Command I when you click on an individual file. Get info will give you some information about the file, including its file size. You're going to want to know the difference between a thumb drive and a hard drive. A thumb drive is a solid state device, meaning there's no moving parts in it, and a hard drive usually has a moving platter inside of it, so it's not something you want to move around a whole lot. We talked about CDs and DVDs. CDs have about 650 megabytes worth of storage on them, whereas DVDs, it's someplace just over 4.5 gigabytes. And then the last thing we talked about were servers. The server is what you will connect to and drop your files onto. All right, so let's talk about your task for when you come into lab this week. What you're going to do is go ahead and start up the Mac, log in and launch Word, and then you're going to type up a one-paragraph bio on yourself. Once you've got that done, you're going to save it to the desktop using the naming convention that we talked about, that year, month, day, your initials, assignment. Separate the your initials and assignment and the date and your initials by an underscore. Save that to the desktop. Then drop it on the server. Once you've got it dropped on the server, copy it to your thumb drive, and then you're going to want to go ahead and eject your thumb drive. Now, this is the last thing about the Macs that you need to be aware of. You can't just pull out your thumb drive when you're done. What you need to do is grab it and drag it to the trash. Now, the trash is in the dock. It's the rightmost icon. Once that drive has disappeared from the desktop, you're okay to unplug it. If you don't drag it to the trash before unplugging it, you may corrupt some of the data that's on there, but it won't be too bad. All right, that wraps up your first of 13 digital literacy lessons. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask your instructors. They are the experts on this. This series was produced for the Journalism Department of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia by a grant from the James M. Cox Institute for Newspaper Management Studies.